Welcome, everyone. It's great to be here again with another webinar. And we've prepared a very special one for you, which is to discuss content moderation in challenging times. We have very special guests today, and we're excited to cover a topic that hopefully will bring value to people right now. We're really struggling with the volume, just like the amount of chat and the workload in content moderation right now is unprecedented. And we hope we can bring tangible value to everyone with some practical tips, and also just looking at the scale of the challenge, understanding what's happening right now. So for an agenda for today, we're going to have an intro of our special guests. We will look at the challenge, look at some data so we can understand the dimension of the problem. And we will jump into the impact of content moderation with questions that I have for our panelists. We will look into how this is actually affecting teams and workflows. And then we will jump into practical tips so we can really get down to the tactics and how you can implement some approaches that will help you manage and sustain your moderation workflows. All right, so let's go to the introductions now. And I would like to introduce you to Amy and Vernon. And I'll give you the floor to introduce yourselves. Welcome.
Yes. Thank you, Carlos. So excited to be here. So my name is Amy Vezeau. I'm the manager of the client onboarding team here at Two Hat. So the integration team really looks after our clients who are joining Community Sift. And so I'll make a bad pun and say we wear two hats. And so the first part is that my team supports us on the technical integration. And then the second part is that we bring our experiences and Two Hat best practices to the community side of things. And so that's really what we're going to be diving into today. So that's me.
Awesome. Welcome. And welcome, Vernon.
Thank you very much, Carlos. It's very good to be here. I'm really pleased that you invited me and I could say something about this unprecedented situation that we find ourselves in. My name is Vernon Jones. I'm the head of safety and community support at MovieStarPlanet, which is the name of the company, and actually is a number of games that are produced for children is targeted between the ages of 8 to 15. So we're working with younger children, and my role is to make sure that the moderation and the child safeguarding practices are in place that support and make all the games that we produce with children as safe as possible. And I'm a social worker by trade. I've worked with NGOs, and I've worked in social services in different countries. So I come from maybe a different background to a lot of other people, but I think that's helped me in relation to child safeguarding issues.
I bet. Absolutely. Well, it's an honor to have you here. Honor to have Amy here as well. And I know that both of you have such an extensive experience and knowledge of this area. It will be really great to hear the practical tips that you can give to people. So thank you so much for making time today to chat with us and share those tips. Appreciate that. So in terms of the challenge, this has been really a very incredible time when you look at the volume, the chat volumes, right? What we have right now here on the screen is really a sample customer chat volume, right? Like we are not even looking at the whole of the chat that we process every month, but you can see that very clearly around the beginning of March, you see a sharp increase in volume. And across those different types of platforms that you see on the right-hand side here, right? So, of course, you have like cross-platform games and general audience, kids products, and also teen products. And you can see that it's a sharp increase. And no coincidence, right? As soon as lockdown is starting and the situation is developing, especially around here, middle of March, you see that sharp increase. To frame this challenge, like this is a visual way to frame for you with a sample of chat volume. But I can also tell you that for some of our clients that are not even represented here in this chart, they have experienced like 40% increase in chat in March compared to February. Others experienced over 100% of increase. And there were cases of experiencing 3,000% increase in chat when you compare March to February. So you can imagine the friction that creates, the strain on a moderation team, right? If there is a small team working on responsible for moderation, maybe community managers, moderators who are responsible for doing different workflows. For example, maybe they're approving usernames, maybe they're reviewing user-generated reports, maybe they are also reviewing escalations, right? Imagine that now this just becomes, you know, I can even imagine like this, the workflow doubling or tripling like almost overnight, right? This is the situation. When I worked for a Club Penguin many years ago, you know, I remember we would have, of course, the high seasons, right? Like if you had like a holiday, you would have a lot of support tickets, a lot of reports to review, a lot of usernames to approve. And it felt, in a way, as a moderator, it felt like we could never get to the other side, right? Like it was really like a huge team effort, and we were like a huge team. This is not a holiday, right? This is a very different situation where everybody is online, and you know, that's how we're socializing. And of course, you have also all our human elements, like you get frustrated, and especially if you're at home all the time, you know, so we can imagine like the issues that are happening there. But also let's look into in terms of the languages too. This graph is about the Italian language, also a sample from the volume that we process, right? Like a lot of our clients use the Italian language to support their communities in Italian as well. So you can see here that when the initial quarantine was implemented in Italy, you can see an increase, but the very sharp increase is on the official lockdown. And right there, you can see that just an increasing volume for those platforms is very substantial, right? And there we can understand how it is impacting our clients in their respective regions that they're supporting, right? Their markets. And a lot of our clients have multiple languages that they're supporting. So you can imagine that not only there is an increasing challenge overall in moderation, you can have a bigger challenge in some languages. And perhaps you have limited staff to take care of that language, right? Maybe you have one moderator responsible for Italian, or maybe a couple, depending on the company. And if we take a look at Spanish, wow, right? Like when the official lockdown happened, that line that we see right here, the increase in chat volume is unbelievable, right? So right there, you can imagine what happened to some of our clients. They had this switch flipped basically overnight. So that brings me to a first question that I have for Vernon, which is, have you seen a similar increase in chat volume for your games, Vernon? And also, how has it impacted the way that you and your teams work?
Well, yeah, the simple answer to that is yes, we have. We've seen a 40, the last time I looked, it was a 40% increase. And I think that's similar to a lot of other companies. And like you say, it was not expected. I mean, I booked my annual leave for April thinking that I could take annual leave before the summer months, before it starts getting busy again. And yeah. And here we are with all the projected figures going out of the window. We all the analytics that we did based upon user numbers, the numbers of tickets that we were getting on moderation, the numbers of tickets we're getting on support, that analysis has just gone out of the window. So we've had to reinvent the wheel or the rule book in terms of how we moderate content, how we moderate chat, and how we deal with the high levels of customer support tickets. That again has gone through the roof in terms of how we can help children and the parents that are contacting us on support. that's been a real issue for us. So it's the volumes have gone up unexpectedly. This has given us challenges. What we've had to do is meet those challenges head on and move very quickly. And it's been a case of all hands on deck, if I can put it that way. I think for managers, we've had to look at how we can put moderation, maintain a moderation service and a support service. But to do that, we've also had to go to the coalface and do things ourselves to cover moderation issues. And it's a long time since I've done moderated tasks, but there was no other way around it in terms of filling in some of the gaps that were there. So I think it's a time that managers have got to get involved as well in terms of helping out moderators. And so that's something that we've done. Support managers, I've been working with support managers to bring the numbers of hours up, and thankfully moderators have been able to do that with us. We've been able to put the number of hours that were needed to meet the unprecedented demand that we were seeing. But that causes issues in itself. Moderators cannot work at this level for a long period of time. So we're having to use the technology to look at ways of limiting the number of tickets on moderation, and we're looking at ways of how the demand can be met, but what we can do in terms of lowering the number of tickets that are coming through on moderation. And that means that we have to make some very tough decisions. We're not going to be able to offer the level of service that we maybe wanted to provide in terms of moderation services and support services. And this is where your triaging comes in. You really have to look at triaging and see what are the things that we have to deal with, what are the things we should deal with, and what are the things we could maybe leave in terms of support tickets, in terms of behavioural aspects that have got to be taken care of, and the ones that maybe we can leave for a while. And obviously, we have to deal with grooming activity. We have to deal with bullying, and we have to deal with the issues, the child safeguarding issues that going to impact on children's lives. So they're the ones that we've been focusing on, and some of the other stuff that maybe can wait, we've put those on the back burner for. So these are some of the challenges that we've met head on, and we have increased hours. We have increased the numbers of the way that we moderate through SIFT, for example, and put new procedures in place that were based upon the triaging that we've made. So yes, and I'm sure this rings home with a lot of companies. So I don't think I'm the only one that's in this boat. But it is a time when we all have to pull together, and this is where you have teams, and this is where the times when you've been together and the training that you've done with moderators, this is when it impacts, and this is the way you use the procedures that you got in place to maintain a good moderation and support service.
Absolutely, those are amazing points, Vernon. Like so many excellent things for people to consider in your answer, right? Like the fact that you said that suddenly you have the situation where all your predictions, right, all your analytics, like it's all out of whack, like right there. I mean, I think right there you see the crisis establishing, right? Like this, a new approach is needed, because you can't obviously go on with the plan as was set a month ago, or as status quo a month ago. There is basically no status quo right now, right? Like things change so rapidly. And the other thing that I really appreciate in your answer is the fact that you said all hands on deck and everybody stepping up. I think that's true leadership, right? Leaders helping with moderation. and actually getting down to the you know, the weeds and doing the work with the team. This is an incredible example of leadership and opportunity for the team to work together as well, right? To calibrate on some of those decisions. So I really appreciated that. And also, I really got the sense of priority, purpose, and sacrifice in your answer, which in times of crisis, that is very important, right? Like, you gotta sacrifice things, and some of the sacrifice might be in the sense that you might not keep the same level, like you said, of support or moderation, but that is in favor of the most concerning content, right? That's in favor of safeguarding kids, safeguarding players, users. And then understanding that there are things that are going to have to be low priority in face of that, right? I think that's a really hard decision for teams and for companies to make, but it's really important that they amend their policies, even if temporarily, right? Like you said, like, create new process, implement that, change things in the tool, and say, you know what, we are gonna have to be okay with not getting on top of X, Y, and Z, because we need to do A, B, and C. And A, B, and C are, like you said, all the topics that directly affect child safeguarding. In the case of a child-oriented platform, that is truly the priority, right? That can be captured through the escalations, like you mentioned, and we will touch on those later on in the webinar. But just that idea of sacrifice, you know, in talking to some of our clients, I saw that. So I think this is a really good segue as well for Amy. I have a question for you too, Amy, and are you seeing other two-head clients experiencing similar challenges? And also, would you be able to give us examples of how of some specific challenges that clients are facing right now, please?
Yeah, totally. So as Carlos kind of showed in our data, we're hearing this from our clients. We're all experiencing just unprecedented sheer increases in user-generated content. So both that and, you know, we're all kind of looking for a place to fill our basic human needs. We need a safe space where we can socialize, where we can learn, where we can grow, and we're not getting that from our physical world. So we're all coming online and we're all connecting. So this is a wonderful challenge to have. But what the consequence of this is that we're really testing the limits of the processes that we have in place. And so all of those plan A, Bs, and Cs are getting rigorously tested with that giant increase in user-generated content. So what I'm seeing and hearing from our clients is we have to really evaluate the strategies that we have in place and make sure that we're getting the right content in front of the right people. And so we're having very frank roundtable discussions about how do we efficiently tackle these problems. There isn't the plans that we had done. We're all prepared for the summer busy season, Christmas time, the holidays. We're always kind of gearing up for those, but this came at a time where we were kind of coming to the table and planning and all that stuff. So not only did it kind of come out of the blue in that way, but now all of these things that we hypothetically had thought about and we had planned about are all really getting pushed to capacity. And so what we're hearing from our clients is that we're happy to be that safe place for our users. We're happy to have these people coming in and making these connections, but we have to really make sure that when they're there, that we're prioritizing safety, that we, you know, we have these plans in place. And as Vernon eloquently said, like, there are some things that are just going to be higher priority now. And there are some parts and no one that we need to address, but they're going to come a little bit later. We're going to get the right content in front of the right people so that we can address this. And at the same time, our clients are coming to us and saying, look, let's review the parts and the pieces that we have in place, and let's see if there's any optimizations or switches in strategy that we can evaluate and implement. So on the you know, the client success side, we really are having our clients come to us with these challenges, and we're having a great moment to thoughtfully consider how we can best optimize.
Awesome. That really helps you to understand how it's a shared experience, right? Everybody is on a similar boat, and it is quite challenging because making those decisions, you know, it usually, well, making decision by definition is you're going to favor something over something else, right? And those are just tough things to do at this time. do you have a specific example, perhaps, Amy, of like a unique challenge that was faced by a client, maybe in terms of a topic or one of those decisions that was hard to make? Like, and of course, like no need to name anybody, but just.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've had really established communities who have had just, as the analytics say, like just very predictable growth. They have these communities that have had really strong relationships, and all of a sudden we've thrown a bunch of new friends in the mix. And so there's challenges with that. So a lot of the discussions that we're having is someone saying, hey, we had moderators look at every piece of this type of content. We had moderation teams just friendly welcome every new person to this platform, and we had people who had eyes on all sorts of things. We're at the point now where we can't do that. So people, in these spaces, we have preteens and teens coming to the space. They're maybe not aware of the way of the land. They're not getting introduced in the ways that they used to back in the day. And so they really have to evaluate like what it's like to become a new member of our community, and how and what we say to them when they join, and how to make sure that everyone is staying safe now that the usual processes are in place. And so like kind of the points that you were talking about, Carlos, of just we have to make sure that they're safe. We also want to make sure they're having a great experience. And so I think in the next little parts we go over like what we can actually do. That's the questions that they're coming to us now. So in the preteen and teen crowd, we're not in school anymore. We're missing that big connection that we used to have. And so the types of conversations that my clients are seeing have changed. And so what people are coming on and discussing and kind of their human experiences are really questioning and making sure that we have the right policy guides and the right kind of interactions between the system and the new users.
Yeah, that's something that I didn't consider. Is now one of the sacrifices is exactly that user onboarding, right? Where you can, which is a technique we're going to discuss very soon. You can't do that introduction. I didn't consider that. You have to sacrifice that, which it is an upstream technique, right? To introduce somebody to what the community is all about, what the code of conduct is, how do you interact in this community? Now you just don't have time for that onboarding or training, for a lack of better word. Yeah, really, really good point. And now in terms of behaviors as well, like it bears the question as well, Vernon, what are some of the most concerning behaviors and trends that you have been seeing? And then on the flip side, how do you think that people are actually benefiting from online games specifically at this time? How is it making us a difference socially as we interact online? And then I will also flip that question, the second part of that question, to Amy.
Yeah, I think these are really good points, because of there are a lot of issues that are occurring at the moment, a lot of issues that are impacting on people all over the world, and this includes children, and they're in a situation that can be frightening for them, and it's the unknown of not knowing what their day is about. They're not going to school. They're not being able to meet their friends in real life, and so we now have this online world, which is good, and we'll come to the positive. But looking at the negatives, if you ask, what we've seen on the games that we produce is that some of the negative aspects of this, we've seen an increase in bullying, and severe bullying, I would call it, linked to racism, and linked to sexism, and that's something that we see, but we have seen an increase in that kind of behaviour, and that's concerning for us. And we're not sure of why that is, but it could be some of the stresses that I referred to earlier, that some children are finding it difficult to relate to the issues, so they may not be getting the support that they require. And maybe this is a reaction to the stressful times that they find themselves in the stressful situation that they find themselves in. But I'm sure there'll be research done on this in the future, and in terms of how this has negatively impacted on some children in relation to engaging in bullying activity, and it has been some of it has been quite severe, and we've had to take action to sanction users and make sure that they're not able to carry on with that behaviour. And the other one, of course, is grooming activity. We're a children's site, and unfortunately, where children are gathered, there are going to be people that have a sexual interest in children that are going to attempt to contact children. And we have seen an increase in grooming activity, and we've seen an increase in the what we call recurring groomers, the ones that we're aware of and that we profile. And so we know when they come back because of the profiling that we do. I mean, I do have a lot of knowledge in terms of sex offending. I used to work with doing risk assessments on sex offenders and young teenage boys who sexually hurt other children. So it is to be expected as well, in terms of what we know about sex offending behaviour, that they're also in a stressful situation. They're at home, and that is a bad thing in terms of their cognitive distortions and the way that they're going to try to deal with the situation that they're in. To make themselves feel better, they will go online and they will attempt to contact children. And I think this is something that we've seen in relation to the increase in attempts to groom children online by the ones that we didn't know and the ones that we are aware of, and the ones that we catch really quickly because we profile them and we know when they come back. So
wow,
they're very yes. I think these are situations that we need to be aware of. That the dynamics of the grooming activity, how offenders react to stressful situations, is something that we need to be aware of, and how children feeling stressed are also going to engage and maybe attempt to go onto other social networking sites where there is live video platforms, and this is what really concerns us. We're seeing an increase in children attempting to go to other social networking platforms where there is a video platform, and that's where the online abuse is taking place. So sexual exploitation. So yeah, I think they're the two main issues that where we've seen a change: the bullying and grooming activity, sexual exploitation. I think there's also been an increase in sexting, we've seen this as well. But I think again that could be related to the stresses that children are under, and they're finding ways to get to feel better, and that's usually the older teenagers. Moving on to the positives, what I've seen is that children are really happy that they've got the opportunity to engage with their friends online. We've had people coming back. We can see from looking at the chat and
nice
through our support that they're saying, "I've not been on MovieStarPlanet for a year, 2 years. I came back." I mean, we did launch a new game, and that brought a lot of users and old users back. But it was really nice that people were saying, "I've come back to MovieStarPlanet. I forgot how nice it was to engage with people, and there are still people here that I used to in 2 years ago." And so there is a positive to this. We should not dwell on the negatives. That's a very small percentage of what occurs online in terms of the platforms that we have, the games that we produce. There is a lot of positivity. There is a lot of children not being able to engage with friends in the real life, and this is I mean, all children were doing this anyway, but this is part of their lives, and it's still there for them to be able to engage with people of their own age. And I think when you're stuck inside, I'm stuck inside with teenagers, and only been able to talk with me, I can see. I can see why they're getting really frustrated, and the opportunity to be able to engage with children or young people of a similar age, we should never underestimate that, and we should look at the positive aspects of social networking and playing games together, and that's something that we've really noticed.
Absolutely, like that's so eye-opening on both accounts, right? Of both questions. I really, your answers are very eye-opening to understand like the social impact, right?
Yeah.
The online spaces are part of society, as I think we have been experiencing this for the last few years or so, where there's more, those lines are blurring, right? The lines between offline and online, and maybe this is that moment that accelerates everything, right? Where we really see that online is inseparable from our lives. And
I think this is really where we need to engage with parents, and something that we're trying to do, and to make parents more aware of this. Some parents are still, they have some issues with their children on engaging with games and social networking sites. So we need to engage with parents and guardians, and where we need to give them the tools that they need to be able to talk with their children and be engaged with the games that they're playing online, as they do in outside activities. I always find it strange that they'll go to see their children play football, or go to the ballet, or to dance, or to chess, but they find it difficult to sit down and play a game with their children, also see what they're doing online.
Exactly, that's a good point, right? What you said before as well, in terms of the negative behavior is a small part of the behavior happening online, right? It's what we see with our clients in general. What we see in the industry is that normative behavior is positive behavior, but still the negative behavior is something we can't ignore, right? Like we're talking about, we are prioritizing those things. And then there's the fact that, well, talking to parents, like you're saying, Vernon, it's important for both things, right? It's important for us to harness the benefits of that online time, but also to tackle the negative, because parents also have a role to play in tackling the negative behavior. So important for us to look at that. And with that, I will also ask Amy for that flip side. Are you hearing some benefits as well from our other clients?
Absolutely. And it's always great to highlight the good, because it is the majority of what we classify here at Two Hat. And it is the majority of the interactions that we have online. So I think some of the interesting stories that we've heard from our clients is how important that educational piece of their software or their platform or their virtual world is. And so we're no longer in school. And so we need to keep growing, and we need to keep challenging our mind. And so we're seeing in we have some wonderful clients who are working in the ed tech space. And so obviously parents are seeking out thoughtful resources to keep their child engaged. And so we're seeing a huge uptake in these wonderful resources where kids are coming and learning. But the important part of that is, when we go to school, we don't sit in cubicles. We don't learn just solely by ourselves. It really is a social process of learning. And so having those features in place, plus pairing that with really solid educational processes and stuff to learn about, really increases the engagement, therefore increases what your child is learning. And so they're experiencing a big jump in traffic, but they're also, the same token, experiencing a big jump in what, how much knowledge the children are consuming on their platform. Even platforms like just virtual worlds are having seeing an uptake in spaces where people come and kind of zen out. So a digital cafe is a place to meet up with your friends and take a breath. Like, there's so much to be anxious about. There's so much to be worried about, and we are. And so we're seeing a big swing and increase of Zen gardens and tasks like come to my house and weed, but come do it digitally. Come together and just take a moment to breathe. So we're seeing kind of two really interesting kind of positive side trends, is that we're learning more online and that we're engaging online in a relaxing kind of state. So I think those are some two kind of like little vignettes that I've seen that I think are just really interesting stories. The upswing also is that we've seen communities come together for one another as resources to support people through these challenging times, resources to disseminate great information about the resources that are out there. So I think there's lots of positive stories to tell about this big kind of jump of engaging online.
Absolutely. Those are amazing examples. Yeah, the
Yeah.
learning component is so awesome. And to see companies making their services available for free as well, right? That is really, really solid. Can we count some of those things you said as trends, or do you want to add any other trends here?
Yeah, I think there's, so I'll swing the pendulum back over maybe to a bit about just the unique situation of COVID-19. So it's really been a chance for our clients to to test on the fly. The policy guides really represent the community guidelines. And so one of those big questions is we're all coming online and you know, we're asking tough questions, we're sharing tough experiences, and to make sure that we are really balancing that line between expressivity and safety. So a lot of us are going through, obviously, you know, anxiety. We're missing our friends and our family. We're missing classmates. We're missing routines. So there's a lot of just like negative feelings associated with that. And as we classify and label that data, we want to make sure that our policy guide is allowing people to come into these safe places and to express themselves. We're keeping it safe. On a more darker side, you know, people are experiencing great loss. We're experiencing income insecurity, dealing with the loss of a family member, being afraid of getting sick. So there are a lot of really negative emotions too that we're all working through. And we want to make sure our clients are kind of coming through and saying, are we creating a space where this kinds of things can be said in a non-disruptive way so that we can come together as a community and learn and heal and get through this? But we have to really thoughtfully consider the policy guide and the safety on that. So we have a lot of, and anxious and depressive thoughts that are all racing through all of our heads right now. This is an unprecedented time. And so we want to make sure that our policy guide reflects that ability to be okay, to grow and to heal together. But we're going to be keeping people safe and we have those right resources in place. I think we have COVID-19 and we also have a new kind of vehicle to weaponize a term. So another kind of trend that we're seeing is we now have a new tool for bullying or wishing someone ill. So a lot of our clients are making thoughtful rules about how to consider discussing COVID-19, your experiences, but how to make sure that I can't weaponize this or bully or damage or hurt someone with it. I can't wish someone ill with it. So we are making up new rules on the fly to kind of adjust and cope with this new world that we're living in. Another really important side of that is that CommunitySIF comes with these custom topics. So we say these are for context that you decide so that you can monitor and label the data. So we can really leverage those in a time like this to say, hey, we want to label the spreading of COVID-19 information. We also want to label the disinformation, because what isn't going to help us in this global crisis is if people are spreading misinformation, spreading rumors and lies, and also using these terms to point them against a protected people or wishing someone ill with these. So we really are seeing an uptake in people looking at that data, making sure that we're having real conversations, but we're taking away that edge or that side that could be used disruptively.
Those are really good points. We are publishing a blog post soon, talking about the protocols to deal with global crisis based on a webinar we did many years ago. And one of the examples included there is how the Dutch language has an issue where people use diseases to harass, to bully others. And then this is happening right now in Dutch, right? Because of COVID, people are using all sorts of terms to harass each other. So in terms of practical tips, and please, Vernon and Amy, feel free to jump in and share thoughts. The first practical tip that I have is to reduce the volume of content upstream if you can, right? So we talked about a couple of those things, but one is being able to actually warn users, right? So if you warn users at the time that something is happening, so very timely on the instant, you can reduce workflow. To give you an example, a company called Nextdoor, they have done a test in the US last year whenever somebody was about to type to send something that was perceived as harassment, perhaps, before they sent it, they would receive that message that said, this could be perceived, constructed as harassment. So please consider rephrasing it, look at our code of conduct. They noticed that 1 in 5 people changed their minds and didn't send that message. So if we're talking about 20% reduction in workflow, that's something upstream that's gonna help us down the road, right? Quite a lot. Also, proactively filtering. I can tell you that a lot of companies out there are not proactively filtering on concerning topics, or they're not seeing the benefit of doing like a proactive approach and actually filtering the worst of the worst. And if you do that, not only you don't expose your users to that behavior in the first place, which is very important, but you also reduce the need for users to report each other. So you also reduce that workflow down the road. And warn and educate users as well about the importance of placing a legit report, and not just reporting somebody for saying hello, or because you lost a match to them, or because you dislike something about their avatar picture, and taking this seriously and saying to users, if you place a false report, there could be action taken against your account, right? And enforcing this. Just before I move to the next one here, I just wanted to see if you have any thoughts surrounding this.
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate that, especially on the proactive filtering. I think it's really important that we look at the language that's being used and add things effectively to the filters based upon the bullying that we've seen in relation to what Amy was talking about, the COVID-19, and making sure that we're able to stop that as soon as possible. And the warnings as well. I think that really is a good point, and something that we are really looking at as well to implement as soon as possible. Excellent.
Thank you for that. In terms of the second practical tip here, and if you have any points, Amy, please jump in. The importance of doing the escalation, like, both of you referred to, and Vernon was talking about how you really have to triage things properly, right? You have to be very mindful of that. So using escalation flows to prioritize sensitive content. And I think Vernon gave a wonderful example there of the topics that really need to be looked at from his perspective, right? Like the bullying, and of course, all the topics that are related to child protection, right? Grooming and in those areas. So leveraging escalation cues. And of course, you can look at your community guidelines and which are the behaviors that are really like the key things that you have to be looking at right now. And to the points that both panelists made, you'll have to make some sacrifices, right? You're going to have to focus very intentively on the things that are going to matter the most right now, that are critical, mission critical points. So you got to revamp your policies. I think we heard this also from both Vernon and Amy. You have to adapt your policies right now. So it's really important for you to do that. Strike that balance between safety and expression, right? You're going to have to make sacrifices, and also look into what are the things you can pre-moderate versus the things you're okay doing post-moderation. Perhaps this is the great opportunity to actually say, let's fine-tune our policies of pre-moderation. Again, let's pre-filter, let's do that proactive filter on those things. But then in terms of post-moderation, there are things that perhaps you can afford to look at after the fact that is not as damaging to the community, right? So striking that balance now, it's going to be very important. Just giving an opportunity there for you to add any points, Amy or Vernon.
Yeah, totally. So I think, I'll beat the same drum on this, is that at this time, this is a moment for us to come together, to question the processes, to thoughtfully evaluate. So what I always say to my clients is, SIFT is flexible. So when we work with Community SIFT, part of what makes it so great is that we're able to try and explore new avenues. We're able to get in there and to really refine and change the processes. So nothing should ever be set in stone. So we're going to use data-driven decisions to make sure that in this time of just unprecedented volume, that we are leveraging the tool to its fullest extent, and we really are taking the time to make sure that we've optimized and we're getting the safest experience, and we're getting the content to the right people.
Excellent. I really like how you phrase it, Amy, getting the content to the right people, right? Like it's humans reviewing the stuff that really matters to them in a timely fashion versus machine taking care of the automation of most of the content. Just I love that intent, purpose in moderation. So really appreciate that. In terms of the last practical tip that I have is really implementing sanctions. As we also have heard here in the panel today, implementing the sanctions to establish the clear consequences for the repetition of negative behavior, right? You need to be able to apply swift consequences so the behavior doesn't continue, right? And they need to be timely, certain, and you can benefit from having a system that has warning implemented first, and then if the behavior continues, you can mute the user or the player, and then you can eventually suspend them for an X amount of hours, all the way up to banning if necessary. As Vernon mentioned, sometimes this is required. It's not, normative behavior that people are engaging in this negative behavior all the time. Have most users engaging in very innocuous positive behavior. However, when they do engage in this sort of harassment, bullying, and other topics, you need to leverage this flow. To give a quick example, one of our clients many years ago, they were struggling because players in their game had unlimited attempts to subvert and manipulate the filter. So they would break the filter, and then they would be able to keep trying that again, right? Because, kids and teenagers and adults too, we are all creative. If we know we're being filtered, we're going to try to oppose it and break the filter. So when you have unlimited attempts, you can break it, right? You can just keep going. So when they implemented warning systems per topic as well, and if somebody behaves in a harassing way, they get a harassing warning. If they try to share PII, they get a PII warning. And also then they put not escalations, but actually sanctions and suspending accounts that really changed the game for them. They were able to not struggle so much with that subversion of the filter. So it's really important here to have that flow, right? It's not all about punishment. You can leverage the warning system as well as an opportunity to change behavior, but sometimes you do need to go down the route of suspending and banning. Any thoughts about that before we move on to our final thoughts and takeaway?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have this pedagogical approach, a social learning approach, so that the children have the opportunity to learn from inappropriate language or inappropriate behavior. And that's what we've been involved in for a long period of time, giving them warnings and giving them messages that maybe you should try to communicate in a different way. And but at the other end of the spectrum, there is always a need for sanctions, and some of the sanctions, so for in terms of severe bullying and grooming activity, like I mentioned earlier, there has to be consequences at a very early stage in terms of child safeguarding, and of course, if grooming activity is identified, then it's got to be an immediate ban and other sanctions as well to prevent them coming back onto the site as much as possible. And so yeah, it is about social learning. It is about a pedagogical approach, but you do need to have sanctions in place.
Excellent. Those are really good examples of when the sanctions are really needed, right? You have to apply them. Yes,
in terms of child protection, child safeguarding, these cannot be different. These have to be in place, and the sanctions have to be given as soon as possible in terms of protecting children, and then escalating them to your safety teams for them to look at escalating it to law enforcement agencies.
Absolutely. One example that I like to give as well in conversations is when I was a moderator for Club Penguin. I remember where, we would maybe issue some sort of warning to the player. We would moderate online, right? We would be online, and we would sometimes remove players from the server if they were misbehaving, right? Like behaving inappropriately. And I cannot tell you how many times the player came back. Right, we're talking about children as well. They came back and they said they didn't know who I was, right? Because I was like a secret agent moderator in the middle of all the penguins. They would come back and they would say, I'm so sorry, right? And they would change their behavior. So right there, right, there is that opportunity to actually change behavior. in that case. It's very anecdotal, but it's something that I did experience. I did see quite a lot. And it'll be awesome now to hear your final thoughts. And I just want to offer some takeaways that I certainly am taking forward with me after hearing your awesome contributions, both of you. One thing that stands out to me is we're talking about a crisis, right? So when there's a crisis, we have to have new protocols. So this is where, and also to Vernon's point, this is where the training comes in handy. So are we as companies having protocols for times of crisis? Do we have planning for this? Do we have training in place, right? Something that we didn't touch on today that we will certainly help our clients with is, how do you manage wellness and resilience for moderators in those times, right? Do we have those protocols? And of course, the policies, like Vernon and Amy said, you have to adapt, you have to have new policies, because all the predictions you did, like Vernon said in the beginning, are out of the window, right? All the statistics are new statistics now. Like, you can't predict what's happening right now. It's just, you gotta adapt. So that's a major takeaway. But also, I love the thoughts that were shared about, that Vernon had about leadership stepping up and really like all hands on deck, and leadership also playing the moderator role. I really appreciate that thought. And we did hear from both of you, from Amy and Vernon, in terms of the sacrifices that needs to be made. Like, you'd have to make hard decisions. You have to put the right content in front of the right people, like Amy said. So you have to make those sacrifices. Those were major takeaways for me. And I would just add that you got to look at what you can do upstream to prevent the behavior, and then you have to take the downstream actions when it comes to muting and suspensions and all that. But I really believe that the path forward is to take those two approaches, upstream and downstream. And would love to hear if you have any final thoughts before we close the webinar.
Well, I think this is a stressful time for everyone in terms of children. As we mentioned earlier, their lives have been turned upside down, and for them to try and put this in some kind of context is really difficult. So we should attempt to do that as well by communicating with children and parents wherever we can, and that can be difficult because you might say the wrong thing. But I think communication is a big thing here about the games. The games are here. The games are safe, and we hope that you're taking the opportunity to play the game and engage with your friends. The other thing about communication is about communicating with moderators and staff, and I think that's really important to explain to them, yeah, this is really difficult, and we acknowledge this is a difficult time, and this is why we're, like I said earlier, this is why we're playing our part as well in terms of doing moderation, and I've done that on a couple of occasions, just making sure that everybody has got a message that how are you and how's things, and because moderators are doing a difficult job at the best of times, and right now they're working a lot of hours, and I think it's extremely important that we communicate with members of staff about how they're feeling as well.
Absolutely. I really appreciate your thoughts in terms of your social awareness, Vernon, to your point of your experience, right, in the beginning, and your background, your social awareness and your human awareness. Just like the fact that you talked about something that, I have been discussing for a while with lots of folks about, like, people have bad days and that affects their behavior online. You just had like really great points about that, how kids are having bad days, right? So it's going to reflect in how they behave and how that affects behavior overall right now online. So I really appreciate your angles, and also absolutely, like, how is that affecting the teams doing this work, right? When you feel like you have this mountain of work and you're working harder and you're working more, and still you have lots of work, right? So I really appreciate those angles. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'd say COVID-19 has disrupted our normal life. We face new challenges and demands that we never expected, and it's really pushing our our community guidelines, it's pushing our processes, it's pushing our people, it's pushing all of us. So I guess I would just end up on the note of communication is that, from my side, like me and my team are here. We're here to be a key player in this pivotal time. We're here to answer questions. We're here to bounce ideas off. So really, this idea of communication and coming together is what's going to see us through this challenging time.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that spirit as well. We got to do things together, right? We got to do our part and try different approaches, find the way forward. Really appreciate that. So just a super quick final thought as a follow-up to this webinar. So this webinar will be available on demand, right? But we will also have a resource. So TwoHat will produce a resource based on previous webinars, based on different approaches, best practices, and protocols we have created in the past. And also with those wonderful thoughts that we heard today, we have so much good content from this conversation today from Amy and Vernon that we can add to a resource. And we want to create this PDF resource that everybody who's watching this webinar and beyond will be able to leverage. And hopefully you will see value in it, very practical applications that you can take forward right away and make a difference in your workflow and the well-being of your staff, and as well as in to be able to better safeguard your users and players.